Hello and welcome back or welcome to the channel. I'm Lavguns and today we're continuing with the Getting Organised series where we look at what it might take to build an org for a certain niche. Today we've got a nomadic survival organisation, an org that wants to stay mobile and head out into the black to make their fortunes. Just before we get into the episode, if you're a new player and watching this sort of thing to see if SE is for you, first congratulations, you've gone very niche. And secondly, just make sure you use a referral code when you create an account to get yourself some extra starter cash. Mine's up on screen, but just make sure to use someone's. Also, if you're looking for folks to enjoy the game with and see what the multiplayer side of SC has to offer, then come and say hi over at the Frontier community. The link to our Discord's just down below. So with all that said, let's get cracking. So I got the inspiration for this topic from an Info Runners video. What would it take for a minimalistic survival fleet? Which I'll link just down in the video description as well. I've got a massive passion for survival games, having sunk more hours than I care to admit into games like Ark, Last Oasis and Space Engineers. I wanted to build on this idea with an episode of Getting Organised. The Info Runners were looking for a minimalistic fleet, but the idea behind this series is that we'll build suitable org fleets for 5, 30 and 100 player groups. So I'm looking for fleets that would suit an org that puts off-grid living first and wants to adopt a nomadic spirit, travelling the stars without having to rely too much on civilization. I particularly enjoy the discussions these episodes create down in the comments and over on Discord, so before we get to the fleets that I've put together, I think we just need to establish a few rules of the game so that we're all on the same page. In this instance, we particularly need to know what's going to be essential for survival out in the black. So first up is fuel. If your goal as a nomadic org is to keep moving, then you've got to have some way to get fuel in the tanks of any ships you're going to put in your fleet. And similarly, you've got to keep yourself and your org mates fueled up. So you've got to be able to nom when you've got to nom, and you've also got to be able to drink when you got to drink. So I'm going to enter a little assumption here, but I personally think a key missing mineable from the game is ice. It features quite heavily in Space Engineers, and I figure it's a bit of a no-brainer for CIG when water becomes more of a pressing issue for players. Particularly when we can't just hop to any old Lagrange point and pick up a bottle of H2O. So therefore, as long as you've got the ability to crack asteroids in your fleet, then I'm going to assume you're ticking the water box. And next we've got protection, and no, I'm not talking about when your captain's going to go full-on Kirk with some alien species. It's just that in my book, if you're heading out into the black indefinitely, then you've got to accept that at some point you're going to find yourself in a situation where someone's shooting at you, and the only way out is to shoot back. Unfortunately, in some of these circumstances, the ships of our fleet are bound to take a bit of damage, so having a way to patch them back up will reduce the amount that we need to put back into port. And finally, in the essentials list, we need to accept that sometimes those bullets might hit you, as opposed to your ship. So the nomadic survival org is going to have to bring some form of medical facilities. Now, I'm not going to say that every fleet must tick all of these 6 boxes, since that's going to be particularly hard with just a 5-person group. But I am going to assess my fleets based on how well we achieve these goals. Our first fleet is for an org of 5 people, so I always think about this as the situation of just a good few mates getting together and playing the game. So something which comes up reliably in these episodes is that a 5-person group can really get by owning just one large ship between them. Maybe with an add-on or 2 if that ship, like the Odyssey, has an onboard hangar. Just remember as well that none of this is a recommendation to go out and buy certain ships for cash. I haven't given a second thought to the real world cost of these ships, I'm just worried about how they would fit together and synergize. So if anything, I would encourage a group like this to start with a smaller ship each, and then work together to grab a larger vessel as an org. So in terms of how well the Odyssey-based 5-person fleet deals with our requirements, fuel is covered by the Odyssey's onboard mining laser and refinery, which allows it to keep producing its own quantum fuel so long as you can find the occasional key rock. I've also included a prospector to fit in the Odyssey's hangar, so this could help with cracking quantanium rocks for the fuel, but also act as an icebreaker for water and to mine any minerals that you might require for any rudimentary crafting. The prospector along with the rocks are also a cash generator for your org. So as much as you made a test civilization, you're probably going to have to return there at some point. Realistically, a small group is not going to be able to create and man the ultimate off-grid survival fleet, and it will need to factor in heading to port to resupply from time to time. That in turn is going to mean you'll need to consider that you've got to bring back something worth credits when you get there if you want to buy services and goods. And this is one of the areas where I reckon the humble rock is really going to come into its own. So one thing that's probably going to be at a premium if you're traversing the stars for prolonged periods is space on board your ship. So in terms of value, gems punch above their weight. So one SCU of Hadonite, for instance, is worth about 250k, while one SCU of the most valuable mineral, Quantanium, is only 8,800 credits. And that's assuming that you can refine it down, whereas the gems just come ready to sell. In terms of medical, we've got a level 2 bed on board the Odyssey, which should do nicely for an Org of this size. So at tier 2 we're currently able to respawn from these, so it should have you covered for any mishaps out in the black. However, I can't give this too high a rating since there are injuries that would only be treatable at a tier 1 bed, so meaning you would have to head back if one of your crew gets that badly hurt. Protection is covered by the Odyssey's fairly impressive armament, with 3 remote turrets each sporting dual size 5 guns. So if under attack by an equally small group, or maybe someone a bit larger, you can probably turtle up on the ship given it's got capital size shield, and try and weather the storm while you either thin out the herd or try to make your escape. This fleet does lack anything in the way of food production or dedicated repair facilities, but this is one of the things I love the most in survival games. Preparing for a big journey should take skill and experience, knowing what you might be realistically able to scavenge out in the wild versus what you need to make sure you're carrying plenty of. Once we go up to 30 people though, we can get off-grid to a fuller extent. And while I don't typically advocate for large cap ships at this sort of size of Org, I reckon it is time to unleash the Kraken. If your group's going to voyage the verse for prolonged periods, you're going to want a home away from home, and with its high levels of versatility, I think the Kraken is the perfect ship to have at the centre of this fleet. It will allow you to bring a host of fighters to help in defending yourselves. The arrows are just representative of fighters in general. The meta shifts so much that I can't keep up. But the Kraken also gives you plenty of room to bring a few useful smaller ships along with you, without them slowing you down with small fuel tanks. So the Argo SRV is primarily there to make sure you can get your larger ships up and down off planets and moons that you may wish to stop off along the way. However, I reckon it's going to prove more versatile than that. Maybe you need to move an unpowered ship to the Crucible for repairs, or you need to stop a mysterious floating hulk from spinning so you can board safely. Speaking of boarding, we've also got the Anvil Legionnaire in the mix, and not just so I can show off the ship that's up for grabs in this month's giveaway. The Legionnaire can be used to send crews over to derelict ships and space stations to clear ahead of salvage parties, but its main reason for appearing in this list is actually as a shuttle to move personnel around the fleet. Without space stations and landing zones to rely on as a way to transfer between different ships, the Legionnaire should be able to get crew around without your larger ships having to move perilously close to one another. Its docking port functionality should make it able to smoothly handle these types of transitions. The Vulture makes an appearance to assist in salvaging materials from any wrecks that you come across, and salvage is likely to be a really important factor for a nomadic Org, allowing you to recycle what you come across and keep your own ships running for a lot longer. And with that in mind, the Crucible is essential in making sure you can conduct repairs on any of your ships, with an onboard workbench to fix up any parts that might have broken, or you might have recovered during your salvage ops. And with a larger crew and more ships, your requirements for fuel and food are going to pick up somewhat, so hence we've got an Endeavour set up with the 4 biodomes to help you grow your own food stock. And until we see the full details on farming in SC, we're not going to know if this setup would be sufficient to keep you going indefinitely, but it should definitely help to supplement whatever long life supplies you've brought with you. Fuel is taken care of by the Starfarer, which should help to expand the Odyssey's refining capacity and provide a good way to refuel other ships in the fleet. I went with the Gemini because I figure it makes sense to take military variants where we can, so that all possible ships in the fleet can contribute towards protection as much as possible. In this situation, I see the Odyssey as very much the pathfinder for the Org, striking out to plot a route and sending back data on points of interest that the main fleet should head towards. By doing that, you could conserve fuel and other supplies within the main fleet and hop between different oases in space. So this fleet gets a tick in the box for food and water, fuel's taken care of, and you've got a reasonable degree of protection. On top of that, you've got the ability to repair and scavenge for parts to keep your ships ticking over. The fleet is still a bit weak in my eyes in terms of medical. We've got tier 2 facilities on board the Odyssey and whatever gets added to the Kraken upon release. But if we get more details on farming and feel we could slim it down to 2 biodomes, then we could potentially incorporate the hospital module for the Endeavour, giving us access to tier 1 facilities. I've also been quite conservative with what will fit on board the Kraken. There's every chance that we could get a bit more brave with our parking and consider bringing along something like an RSI Apollo to get a tier 1 medbed that way. I think one thing to consider is the efficiency of moving a fleet once you start getting out of the single ship options. I've only included large and capital sized craft that will actually have to travel under their own steam for the majority of the time. This just ensures you'll be matching speed and range to a greater degree, leading to less stopping to refuel smaller ships which ride along on their larger counterparts instead. And finally, let's take a look at a 100 person org. So this gives us a lot more flexibility, but also a lot more mouths to feed. So we'll keep our core of the Kraken with its additional ships, but we'll add quite a bit around the edges. So first, let's grab some more Endeavours. This should give us at least 2 dedicated to food production, while also being able to incorporate the Hope class medical version. This gives the fleet a full hospital, pretty much the best medical facilities you can expect, and build to be on par with anything you find at a major LZ. So speaking of more ships equals more fuel equals more startfarers, so I'm hoping 2 will provide enough coverage. The inclusion of a consolidated Outland Pioneer might warrant a bit more attention though. So for long-term survival you're going to need to be reliant on growing your own crops, and whatever you can cobble together out of the crafting system that was highlighted during the Misk Expanse Q&A. So to do any of these things at scale, I think you're probably going to have to at least temporarily put down some roots on a planet or a moon. So during a brief vacation planetside, you might be able to resupply your fleet with food, water, fix up parts, and even potentially manufacture important things like ammunition. But you're going to have to feed that machine with raw materials. So for that, I can't think of anything better than the RSI Orion. It's a truly massive mining and refining platform that should allow you to gather any mats that you need to put down your outpost and feed your production lines. The Banu Merchantman here will allow us to link this chain together. So the Orion's disadvantage is that it's spacebound and unable to head down into atmosphere. The BMM offers a mass cargo transporter able to break in and out of Atmo under its own steam. The Merchantman can also act as your org's link with civilization, heading back to populated space to sell any cool stuff you found on your adventures through its onboard shops, while the crew themselves stock up on supplies that you've been able to find or manufacture on your own. And finally, while the BMM is a trader at heart, it's a bit of a sleeper combat ship. So the Banu fall back on these ships as the core of their military fleets when they go to war. And with its rather large guns, so I believe it's got size 8s, it's unlikely to be a slouch in combat. But when it comes to protection, it does help to have a few ships in the fleet that are out and out combat vessels. So to this end, we've got a Polaris, a Perseus and a Hammerhead. The combination should be able to provide a decent vanguard should you come under fire, and particularly then when it's supported by the guns of the less combat-centric ships in your fleet. Obviously, once certain unknown variables become known, you could refine this fleet quite a lot. Do we have sufficient food production capacity? Will my assumption that ice will be added as a mineable prove correct? But this stuff is kind of half of the joy of theory crafting. However, working within the rules of the game, this fleet should be able to stick it out in the back for prolonged periods of time with little to no reason to be blinded by the bright lights of ArcCorp. You've got food and water ticked off, refueling capacity with some contingency, top grade medical facilities, and a reasonable enough amount of firepower to scare off most would-be aggressors. So that's it for today's episode. I hope you found this interesting, and please do get in touch to let me know if I've missed something blaringly obvious, or what you would have done differently. So part of the reason I love doing these types of theory crafts is that there are so many right answers out there. Ships in SC are often designed to be versatile, and then when they're put in the hands of players they become even more so. So if you think I've earned it, consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons, that helps out a massive amount. And if you would like to take your support for the channel a step further, there is a Patreon which I've linked in the video description down below. Congratulations to JMXH, who was the winner of the May giveaway for Misk Expanse. This month I'm going to be giving away an Anvil Legionnaire, one of the recent combat ships announced during Invictus. So you can use this ship to smash your way on board enemy ships and space stations, or as a convenient shuttle like I did. All you have to do to enter is comment on any of my videos from this month, June 2022, and you can enter once per video, but you can enter multiple times by commenting on any and all of the videos from this month. I'll draw a winner and announce it at the start of July, so best of luck to all of you. And with all that said, thank you very much for watching all the way to the end, and I look forward to seeing you next time.